You're listening to The Tales We Tell, a podcast about spooky stories, unsolved mysteries, and local lore. I'm your host, Hannah Parch.
And I'm Katy.
Well, welcome back! I really do freak out every time we do that.
And I always avoid making eye contact with you, too.
I'm like, let me look just to the left of you.
I look just over to the right of you.
I hope that in one of those Skype calls we did, or Zoom calls, whatever, I hope we got that somewhere. Us, like, awkwardly doing the intro. Although I don't think we ever did. Because I don't think we've ever done the intro.
It's been so long.
Yikes.
And my brain doesn't work properly anymore. So there's that.
Well,
but also, I always see you out of the corner of my eye, and your head tilts, and I do the head, like, back and forth.
My thing is I really just cannot think while I'm doing it. But as I start, I'm always like, am I going too fast? Am I sounding too fake?
Do you sound like an NPR host?
Am I going to forget the words?
A lot of pressure.
There's a lot of pressure. Jarek told us to say something snarky and ding our glasses.
All right, so something snarky and ding our glasses.
Boom. Don't tell us what to do. I have a fun American healthcare horror story.
Awesome.
A quick one. For literally anyone who doesn't live here. So you know those headaches I've been having for like 2 months? So my doctor was like, oh, let's get a CT scan, right? Smart.
Fun.
Scan your brain. And so I waited a couple weeks for like waiting to get the call for like, this is when it's scheduled for. Didn't get it. And so I called my doctor's office back and they were like, oh, your insurance denied that. You have to have like pre-authorization. So they denied that. So what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. What does the doctor want to do? So they're like, okay, we'll refer you to a neurologist. I was like, okay. So the neurologist called me to set up that appointment. And she was like, oh, yeah, it makes sense that they didn't approve your CT scan because it didn't come from a neurologist, which I was like, that sounds silly. They're booking into the end of July. And I called a bunch of other neurologists. Also, I found out there is a difference between a neurologist and a neurosurgeon. I assumed to be a neurosurgeon, you had to be a neurologist. Anyway, I had a very feeling silly moment where someone called me back and was like, these are neurosurgeons. They're not neurologists. Anyways, so I decided finally, I was like, let me call my insurance company. I work in healthcare. Like, I'm fairly
you should
versed.
know the ropes.
Yeah. So I called, and they're very pleasant. And I was like, I'm just trying to figure out, like, if we can, like, I told them what was going on. I was like, can we appeal this? Can you tell me, like, how the referral needs to come through so that you'll approve it? And the lady's like, oh, hold on, let me look. And she puts me on hold, and she comes back. She's like, we don't have any record of a request for authorization for a CT scan. And I was like, what? I was like, are you kidding me? So I had to call my doctor back, and I was like, hi, my insurance said you didn't ask about this. And then, of course, the lady I'm talking to be fair, my doctor is wonderful, and her nurse is wonderful, because I didn't even ask to talk to her nurse, and she still called me back. But she was like, well, I don't deal with insurance or pre-authorizations or anything. The lady who does will be back on Tuesday. I was like, you guys.
Did I ever tell you my mammogram horror story?
No.
So, I'm over 30 years old. I'm now at the age where my mom was first diagnosed with breast cancer. Mm-hmm. So, kind of scared me. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure I am as old as my mom was when she had her first child.
Oh.
AKA me. The only.
The only one.
Because she was diagnosed, like, right after I was born.
Yeah.
So, like, really walking in her footsteps here.
Right.
But anyway, you know, with my lifetime risk assessment for having breast cancer being pretty high, doctor's like, I want you to do a mammogram, and then like 6 months later we'll do MRI, and we'll just kind of keep that on a rotating basis,
right? Just
to like early prevention or early detection, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So I get a call from the imaging center. They've got my appointment set up. Cool. The day before my appointment, I get another call, and they're like, hey, so let's just get things set up for tomorrow. And I realized that there's no, like, you're only 30 at the time that I was going to do this. Like, most insurances won't cover a mammogram for under 40. And I'm like, okay.
You're like, did you tell them? Now?
And she's like, yeah, I just wanted to let you know this before you got here in case you need to change your mind. I'm like, I'm gonna pursue the insurance thing, but how much will it cost? I think it was like $350 without insurance. Okay. And I'm like, not as terrible of like, some medical procedures or whatever, but still, like, $300 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's especially a lot of money if you are already paying a lot of money for insurance.
Yes. And for a preventative, like,
preventative care.
Thank you. Yep. You'd think I would know more of the terms.
So I call my insurance company, and I think they said they'll cover the mammogram. They just need a prior authorization letter from my doctor. I'm like, cool. I'll just call my doctor and get them to send that on over. And they're like, that's all you need. And also, I was like, I also need some physical therapy. What do you cover on physical therapy while I've got you here? And they're like, oh, 80/20, blah, blah, blah. We'll file it. They didn't. They didn't want to pay for jack. And part of it was because a physical therapist didn't bill it right away. And, it was a whole big mess. But we're not talking about that mess because insurance.
Truly.
So I call the doctor's office, talk to the nurse. I'm like, hey, since I'm under 30, they just need a prior authorization, yada, yada. She calls me back a little while later. She's like, I've been on the phone with your insurance company for over an hour now. And they keep saying they're not going to cover it because your age or whatever. And I'm like, did you tell them that my mother died of breast cancer? Yeah. She was first diagnosed pretty much at the age I am now. She's like, yeah. And I'm like,
she's like, that's all I told them.
I'm like, what else do they want? Like, what better reasoning could I possibly have for paying? And again, it's only $350.
Which is nothing
for the insurance to pay for. Because it's so much cheaper to pay for preventative care than actual treatment.
Yeah.
Because you know how ungodly expensive it would be if I did get cancer and how they'd be paying through the nose. Yeah. So I'm like, screw it. This is something I need to get checked.
Yeah.
And I go, and at the imaging center, I'm like, look, just go ahead and bill the insurance. If they pay it, great. If they don't, whatever, I'll pay for it.
Yeah.
Fast forward 9 months, I get a bill from the imaging center because nobody bills things on time.
Of course.
And insurance doesn't take care of things. So.
Yeah. Did you have to pay the whole out of pocket?
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Good grief.
I think they said that some insurance companies will pay for one mammogram between 35 and 40, but it's only until 40 do they cover 4 annual mammograms. And that's just the dumbest shit I've ever heard.
Literally what prior authorizations are for is like to prove that this is a needed, Ugh, good grief. Well,
so ladies, self-check, because if you're under 40, you're paying for mammograms out of pocket.
Yay for... Well, I wish I could say that tied in with today's story, but it doesn't. I was just feeling salty about medical mostly because I've had a headache most of the day. Also, I think I threw my back out cleaning.
So this is not an episode. This is just a bitch fest.
Well, your poor husband is the one administering all of my drugs. And of course, I don't, I'm not like...
No, don't poor husband me right now. He got the double flip off earlier. I needed to go buy dog food today, but it's such a hassle to go out with the kid.
Yeah.
By myself, especially to go inside.
And get a heavy thing.
And I literally have to go in and get a bag of dog food. But I can't leave him in the car, even though it'll be a quick in and out. So I'll have to get him out of the car. And so I'll be having to carry the big, bulky car seat in one hand. I'm not going to be able to get the giant bag of dog food with the other hand.
Yeah.
So I'd need the stroller, but the stroller is way too much of a hassle to get out and
then
set up and then walk in, get the one thing, and then walk out. It's just such a nightmare, so I just put it off until I forgot about it. And then he came home and asked if I'd gone, and I was like, I was so mad at myself, and then he got mad at me, and...
Here's my question, though. He literally works at a grocery store where they sell dog food.
Not the stuff our dogs eat.
Oh, okay. Your dogs are bougie. Never mind.
They are bougie.
I was going to say, if Jarek worked at Publix, I would be like, here's the grocery list for the week. Come home with it. Because I ain't going out. Okay. Sorry. Enough dilly-dallying.
A lot of that can be scrapped. Sorry, guys.
Okay. I do have 2 announcements. The first one is in reference to whether or not this episode is safe for Dante, our little nephew kid. It's mostly Dante safe. So if you have a young listener, I would say it's mostly an okay episode. If I remember, I will try to warn you about, there's a couple extra mature parts, and I'll try to warn y'all before we get to this.
And I will do my best to watch my language.
The other announcement is that I got so much of this information from another podcast that I didn't... Okay, I had to dig to figure out that this was a podcast. It's called Unresolved. Mm-hmm. It's hosted by Michael Wellen. And the reason I had to dig and figure out, because they have a website, they don't post like the transcripts. It's like they post a whole in-depth like article about the topic. So I was just reading it and I was like, wow, what a great website that just has all of these unsolved mysteries. And then I was like, let me see if it's a podcast, because it sounds like it should be. It 100% is. But they had a lot of really valuable information. They were my jumping off point. And their episode on this was originally published July 18th of 2021. And this is the story of the death of Robert Wone. Pause for dramatic effect.
I was like, is she waiting for me to respond? Because I got nothing.
I do have a couple cute little, I don't know, just sweet little facts that I'm going to pepper in just at the beginning. It goes downhill pretty quickly. Okay.
That's kind of our theme here.
Yeah, it is. So, Robert Wone was born June 1st, 1971 in Brooklyn, New York. He was a 4th-generation Chinese-American. His great-grandparents immigrated to the U.S. in the 1930s, and his family basically settled in New York and then just didn't leave, which I think is kind of cool. He was described as kind and friendly. He was someone who did good deeds just for the sake of doing them.
Well, Mr. Rogers type.
Yeah. So, for example, during exams in college, he would go around the library and hand out candy to students who were studying, which I'm just like, God bless you. He was also an excellent student, and in high school, some of his friends predicted that he would be the first Asian American president. He was also described as, quote, energetic and earnest with a touch of street savvy, because he grew up in Brooklyn. And one of the examples of this is he carried around 2 wallets at all times. Both of them had money and credit cards, but one of them was like a decoy wallet. So I assume it had like either fake credit cards or like canceled credit cards or something. But it was
low credit limit.
Yeah.
So you can't spend much.
Yeah. Yeah, and that it was in case he got mugged. He would have a decoy wallet to throw, which is smart. He attended William and Mary, which is in Virginia, for his undergrad in 1992, and it's there that he met Joseph Price, who would become one of his close friends. I forgot that I have a picture of Robert I can show you. I, of course, downloaded all these pictures right before you walked in. Or after you walked in. Oops. There's Robert.
Aw, he's a cutie.
He looks so friendly, too. I think this is a picture, I'm assuming, on his wedding day.
That's what I was about to ask.
Yeah.
I didn't know if he was the groom or a groomsman, but...
He was definitely the groom at one point. I don't know when that picture was taken. So, at college, he and Joseph both restarted something called the 13 Club, which is a school club that did secret acts of kindness around campus. Which I'm just like...
Okay, I like this person, so I have a feeling I'm really not going to like this story.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, oh man, all these sweet little details are just making it worse.
Also, it makes me want to go and do random nice things.
I know. So nice. And then I remember I hate people, so... Not all people, just like Most of them. Not any of you guys who are listening.
Yeah,
none of you. I love all of you.
Y'all are our favorite people because you're our people.
You're the bee's knees, guys.
And I really like bees.
That's true. I forgot that you liked bees.
I had a bee-themed baby shower.
And didn't I make you... No, that was Susan. I was going to say, did I make you...
No, you didn't.
Oh, okay. Well, I made Susan something.
You made me a quilt, and that's awesome. So, you didn't make it for me. You made it for Critter.
That's true. Man, I'm apparently getting you and Susan confused. I painted like a thing that just says bees? Question mark. And I think it's just because you or Susan would both get that joke, and
yes.
Not many other.
It's a joke that you and I say often.
It is. It's one of my favorite jokes, actually.
It's just one word.
Bees?
It's an easy joke to remember.
Bees?
Beads.
I'm hearing bees. Okay. So random acts of kindness. Robert graduated from William and Mary in 1996 and then went on to attend law school at the University of Pennsylvania, where he graduated in 1999. And he landed a job at the firm Covington and Burling in Washington, D.C., where he had a very promising future.
Don't. Just like...
Sorry, there's some more sweet stuff to come. His friend Joseph Price, graduated in 93, so he was like a senior when he met Robert. And Joe went on to get his law degree from the University of Virginia. By 2006, he had made partner at a Washington, D.C. law firm called Arent Fox. And he lived with his partner Victor Zaborski and their boyfriend Dylan Ward in a $1.2 million townhome in D.C., where they also apparently had a fourth roommate named Sarah who rented out the basement. She's not important, but she was only mentioned once. It's a little strange to me.
So wait, was Joe in a throuple?
Kind of. So Joe and Victor were like long-term partners. Mm-hmm. I saw it described as Joe, Victor, and Dylan were in a polyamorous relationship, but then I also read that Joe and Victor, so it was Joe and Victor and then Joe and Dylan, and like the Dylan-Victor thing didn't really happen, but Victor was okay with Dylan living with them, and they considered all three of them to be a family. So there were only like 2 sexual relationships within the group, but they all considered...
So like, it was always 2 at a time, not 3 at a time.
Yeah, basically.
That might have been a mature warning that we forgot there.
Oh no, it'll get more...
I saw, this is reminding me of an episode of Forensic Files that I saw. There was, it wasn't quite a throuple. Okay. Kind of like, this is also not really a throuple. Like, in my mind, a throuple is like equal partnership. This was also like I'm dating you, but I'm also dating you, but neither of you were dating each other.
Yes, that's kind of what it is. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, I feel like it's kind of like Sister Wives, but Dylan was more like the sister girlfriend. Like, I don't know. They really made it seem like Victor and Joe were like the long-term, solid
They
partners.
were the real deal.
Yeah.
And then boyfriend was just fun on the side every now and then.
Yeah. But they all lived together.
I mean, if they were all consenting adults, what does it matter to us how to define or understand their relationship dynamics? And like if they understand it and they're cool with it, then fine.
And honestly, if my married boyfriend had a $1.2 million townhome in Washington, D.C., I would be like, yeah, I'll live there. I don't care if your husband doesn't like me. Okay. In 2002, Robert met his future wife, Kathy Yu, who's also a lawyer. And just months into their relationship, he knew that he wanted to marry her. He proposed with a trail of rose petals that led to a silver fortune cookie with the message, "Will you marry me?" inside. They were married the following year, and they soon settled into domestic bliss in Oakton, Virginia, which is in Fairfax County. And they soon started talking about adopting a baby girl from China.
No.
I know. And that is where all of the nice stuff ends. So gather all those things up and cherish them.
Just hold on to him, hug on to him for warmth, gang.
Yeah. In 2006, Robert was growing discontent at Covington and Burling and decided he wanted to do something more meaningful with his career. So in June, he applied for a job at the General Council for Radio Free Asia, which was a nonprofit that provided uncensored media content to underserved communities in Asia. And even though it would mean a significant decrease in his salary, Kathy was super supportive and told him to go for it, and he got the job. Obviously, because he's, as we already discussed, really good at everything he does. So he gets the job, and in August, there's a legal seminar coming up, and I couldn't tell if it was maybe like a continuing education thing. I don't know if lawyers have to go to those.
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, I just got back from a conference in D.C., and that's continuing education.
So fancy.
I always wanted to go to D.C.
Was that your first time?
Yeah.
Oh.
Every other time I've either been at Dulles or Reagan, a.k.a. airports.
Yeah. I will say your child, I thought it was hilarious, looked very unimpressed by the Lincoln Memorial, but looked really thrilled in all the other pictures.
Yeah, he was a little bit humdrum about Abe. He's like, hey guys,
He's like,
you're just running me all over this town, and I don't
He's like, I've only been in this world for 2 months, and now you're showing me a human that is like 100 times the size of every other human I've ever seen.
He's also surrounded by more humans he's ever seen. Also, he's 3 months, dear.
Oh, sorry. Did I say 2?
Mm-hmm.
No, my bad. The first month doesn't really count.
Yeah, I wasn't really here the first month either.
Okay. So there's a continuing education law seminar coming up. And also, because he has been working at the Radio Free offices, he really wants to introduce himself to the second shift staff, because obviously he's just like the nicest human being in the world and wants to know everyone who works there. But this was going to put things really late, right? Because second shift doesn't start until later. The continuing ed thing was in the evening. So he talks to Kathy, and they both agree it would be easier, instead of trying to take public transportation home at like that late of an hour, if he could just spend the night in the city. He's going to work the next day, just cut out the middleman.
Yeah, I'll just stay at a hotel tonight kind of thing.
They're like, okay, he'll stay in the city. And he's like, oh, our good friend Joe lives in town. He's got this fancy...
Doesn't even need a hotel.
Yeah. So he emails Joe, and Joe is like, of course you can stay at our house. Robert and Joe had actually remained pretty close after college. Joe, Victor, and Dylan had all hosted Robert's 30th birthday party just 2 years earlier, and Joe and Victor had attended Robert and Kathy's wedding in 2003. So, family, friends of the family, whatever. It made sense. Yeah. And giant house. So, on the morning of August 2nd, Robert and Kathy get up and go to work as usual. They had a routine of emailing each other once they got to their offices, which I lied. That is the last adorable thing, because it's so cute. After work, Robert left. He got a sandwich and went to the legal seminar. And around 9:30, he gets out of the seminar, and he called Kathy from the cab on his way back to the Radio Free offices. And he tells her, I'm headed to the office now. My plan is to just go straight to Joe's after this and probably just go right to bed and, get
just
an
crash.
Yeah. So that was around 9:30. At 12:06 a.m., Kathy got another phone call, and this time it was from Joe. And he said, quote, I can't believe I'm calling you about this. Go over to George Washington Hospital. Robert has been stabbed in the back. Pause for dramatic effect. Okay. Yeah. So, just 17 minutes before that phone call was made, 911 operators in the area received a call from Victor wow, I spelled his name wrong. Zaborski? Victor, whatever. So, you can listen to the call. He sounds pretty frantic, and he tells them that, quote, evidently, someone had broken into their home and stabbed their friend in the stomach. The 911 operator asks, is the victim breathing? And he says, I don't know because I'm upstairs. My partner is downstairs with the victim. He told me to go upstairs and call the police. And so the 911 operator is, like, asking the normal questions.
Mm-hmm.
And she's saying, you know, like, you said he was stabbed. Is he bleeding? Yes, he's bleeding. Okay, this is what you need to do. So she gives very clear instructions, which this is a new thing I learned. So everyone listen, this is what you do.
If the stabbing instrument is still there, don't remove it.
Don't remove it. So she says you need to apply pressure to the wound. Mm-hmm. She says to find a towel or some kind of cloth and apply pressure. And when that cloth gets saturated with blood, apply another one on top of it, but don't remove the initial towel. Just keep piling ones on top as they get soaked. Mm-hmm. So she's very specific. She's very clear. And Victor is still on the phone with her as paramedics are arriving. And Victor does say a couple times to her that he doesn't know who did this. So paramedics arrive at 11:54, and Victor is waiting for them on the porch wearing a white terry cloth robe and crying. And inside, paramedics said that it was unusually calm. They said normally in a situation like this, everyone is really frantic and trying to, like, direct them where to go. But that was not the case. So they go upstairs, and as they're going up the stairs, they run into Dylan, who is coming out of the bathroom, appeared to be freshly showered, and was also wearing a white terry cloth robe. And they say, hey...
A lot of white going on.
I know.
With apparent stabbing.
Yeah.
Stabbings, I've never witnessed one in person, but my understanding is they tend to be rather bloody and messy.
Yeah. That...
Lots of blood splatter.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I can't make it through a regular non-stabby day wearing white without getting something on it or getting it dirty.
Yeah, wearing white is risky.
White is not part of my wardrobe.
Oh, well, not anymore, for sure. Oh, God. Maybe like a
Not for the rest of forever, either.
Like a dingy off-white color. Patterns are your friends now. You know, stains can just blend in. So they ask Dylan, they're like, hey, what happened? And he doesn't say anything. He just points towards the guest room at the end of the hall. And then he goes into his bedroom and closes the door. Paramedics are like, okay. So...
Must be in shock. We'll go with that. That's a unique response to an emergency.
So they go into the guest room and they find Robert lying on his back with his arms at his side on a fully made pull-out sofa. And Joe was sitting beside him on the bed in only his underwear with his back to the door. It did not appear that anyone had made any attempt to stop the bleeding in Robert's multiple torso wounds. And Joe didn't turn around when paramedics came in, but simply said that he had heard a scream. So the paramedics were like, this guy is a little problematic, so we're going to tend to the victim here, but we're also not going to turn our backs to you, and we're going to low-key make sure that...
Show us your hands.
Yeah. They said they kind of, like, low-key checked him for weapons. They were just like, his hands, is he holding anything?
Just assess the situation.
Just assess, yeah. And so, like, the first thing you're supposed to do in, like, CPR training is, like, make sure the scene is safe.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you don't want to be, like in the middle of a busy road kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
check for traffic.
Yeah. Make sure the area is safe and, like, you're not going to get hurt yourself.
And then you try to wake up the person, right? You shake them vigorously.
It's been a little while since my certification, but no.
I feel like you're supposed to call to them, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, not
necessarily shake them.
Okay, whatever. Close. I was close.
What if they have a spinal injury?
I know. You're not supposed to move them. Okay, so paramedics are doing a much better job at this than I would. So they start working on Robert. They notice that he is still wearing his mouth guard. He had like a dental mouth guard. He had been stabbed 3 times, twice in the chest and once in the stomach. The wound in his chest was described as gaping. And on the scene, they noted he had no pulse or no heart activity. So they very quickly got him out of there. And transported to George Washington Hospital. And unfortunately, once he got there, he was officially pronounced dead at 12:25. So police arrived on the scene shortly after the paramedics, and they noticed a couple odd things since they're not preoccupied with trying to save this victim. So they noticed there was no sign of a struggle or a break-in, and Robert's phone, both of his wallets, and his expensive watch were all still sitting like on the table where he had placed them. There was only one indentation in Robert's pillow, indicating that he hadn't moved his head at all. He had just like laid down and stayed completely still. There was also almost no blood. And as you mentioned before, stabbings tend to be a little bloody, a little messy. So there was a light smear of blood across Robert's stomach, but it looked like it had been put there intentionally, not like it had come from the wounds. Mm-hmm. There were 2 small blood stains on the sheets beneath him. There was there was no blood on the cutting edge of the knife that was found at the scene. There was a knife found at the scene. But according to court records, quote, a visible amount of Mr. Wone's blood and also some of his cut chest hairs and a globule of human tissue or fat was on the blade of the knife, but just not on like the cutting part. Yeah. I don't know. There also, I don't know if I mentioned this, I'm sure I wrote it down somewhere. There also wasn't any, or there didn't appear to be any fibers like from Robert's shirt that would be on the knife.
Interesting that you can get tissue and hairs, but I mean, if he was wearing a shirt, there should be fibers on that as well.
Yeah, and he was wearing a shirt. There were 3 blood stains on a white cotton towel that had been, allegedly, that was what they used to stop the bleeding. The blood stains were approximately 2.5 by 3 inches, and they looked like stains you might get from wiping a blade off and not from
staunching a stab wound.
Yeah. Also, the knife that was at the scene had come from the kitchen, or from the knife block that was in the kitchen, but the blade was longer than any of Robert's wounds turned out to be. The bed sheets had been neatly folded down at a 45-degree angle, and Robert was just laying on top. Like, the bed was completely made.
I'm starting to get some theories here.
And Robert's body was almost completely clean, almost as if someone had washed, redressed, and placed it back in the bed. So,
did they do a tuck screen when he got to the hospital?
They did.
Okay. Should we all take a drink?
Yes. And just take a drink because it's not going to provide any satisfying answers.
Well, no, of course it wouldn't.
Oh, I should have warned you. This is a deeply unsatisfying episode.
Well, it's unresolved, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. So. Okay.
Knew that one going in.
So, Joe, Victor, and Dylan are asked to just remain, like, in the living room because the police are now like, well, this whole place is a crime scene.
And we need witness statements.
Yes. So, as they are waiting, they were observed whispering amongst themselves. And at one point, Dylan started to speak to police, but when he did, Joe, quote, gave him a stare that officers interpreted as forbidding, and he stopped and let Joe do all the talking. Oh, I have pictures of them too, I forgot. I didn't have time to find labeled pictures. I think they're in order. So, that is Joe, I'm pretty sure. That is Victor, and then that's Dylan.
I think Joe and Victor look cute together. Dylan, no.
Dylan doesn't seem to match, right?
No. I mean, I feel like if you're going to have, a long-term partner and then basically a mistress.
Yeah.
You could do better, right? Like, if you were going to have, like, an extramarital person. I feel no offense, Dylan. Like,
Dylan is...
He's not my type. But he's not, like,
he's
unattractive.
Closer to my type than not.
Yeah.
But I feel like maybe Victor looked at him and was like, I can't get into that. And then, like, Joe was just like, whatever.
I don't know.
Anyways. They all had high-powered jobs, and they're not important enough for me to mention. So, okay. So, Robert... Oh, okay. Sorry. Backing up. So, police pretty immediately took Joe, Victor, and Dylan in for questioning. And they did question them separately, but they all told the same story. So according to them, Robert had arrived around 10:30. Victor was already upstairs in bed watching Project Runway because he, I guess, had just gotten home from a business trip and didn't want people anymore. So he goes upstairs.
I don't blame him.
Yeah. And Joe and Dylan stood in the kitchen chatting with Robert for a little bit before showing him to his room. Joe went up to the 3rd floor master bedroom that he shared with Victor. And Dylan went up to the 2nd floor bedroom that he shared with no one. And read for a few minutes and then took a sleeping pill, which was common for him, and went to sleep. He told police that he had heard Robert take a shower and then heard the guest room door close, like all before he went to sleep. Joe said that he was woken sometime later by the door chime because they had an alarm system that chimed whenever the front or back doors opened. Which I wish I didn't see anywhere, but so he says, oh, I thought it was just Sarah coming home for the night. So Sarah rents the basement apartment from them, which I would assume had a separate access, but
it might not. Also, the basement might, even if she does have a basement access, they might have an alarm, like a door chimer on that door too.
That's true. I would just, for $1.2 million, like, put a separate alarm on that one. Let me set my alarm at night. So when Sarah comes home at all hours of the morning, she doesn't wake me up. Or so I can set my alarm before she comes home.
Yeah.
I'm just
saying. I mean, I don't know. Also, again, like if you've got a separate living space and like maybe you don't have it let, you know, like no one's living there at the time, like I can see wanting to have an alarm on there that maybe isn't separate. So if you're like, wow, why did the door just chime? I don't hear anyone in the house. No one's supposed to be in the basement. Maybe we've got an intruder.
Yeah. I don't know. This is also the only time Sarah shows up. Like, okay. She doesn't come back to the house at all. And as far as I know, she wasn't questioned.
Probably smart.
I know. I feel like she heard about everything and was like, I'm just going to go ahead and...
She might have, like, come home and seen, you know, the flashing cop car lights, and I could just see her, like, backing up, like...
Backing up. She's like,
nope.
I'm going to find somewhere else to stay. Okay, so he thinks Sarah's coming home. And then he said sometime later, it could be as many as 10 minutes after that, Joe heard, quote, guttural moaning. And he and Victor both run downstairs to the 2nd floor where they find Robert's door ajar and find him lying on the bed bleeding from multiple stab wounds. Neither of them said that they heard the door chime again or heard anything that sounded like someone else was in the house. Joe allegedly tried to stop the bleeding, which, He also moved the knife, which he said he had found lying on Robert's stomach. So... And he tells police, he's like, oh, my DNA might be on the knife because I moved it. But the, quote, real killer's DNA probably isn't on there because he probably used gloves. But mine's on there. You'll find mine on there. It's because I moved the knife. But the real killer probably used gloves. So, like, probably not. So.
Well, also, it's our knife from our kitchen. So DNA is definitely going to be on there.
Yeah, he maybe was over-explaining a little bit.
See, that's how I envision if I'm ever called in to the precinct to do, like, if I ever have to do a polygraph, I'd be like, look, I don't want to say no to a polygraph because it'll make me look guilty.
Right.
But I know that, you know, it doesn't actually read guilty or innocent. Yeah. It reads stress, and I'm very stressed out about being accused of this thing, so I'm gonna probably fail. Not because I'm guilty, but because I'm really stressed. Yeah. And, like, these are the things that I think about and get worked up on.
Yeah. You can be comforted by the fact, though, that polygraph results can't be used as evidence. Also, you can be comforted because I just assumed that they wouldn't be able to get a good baseline on me. Because I would just be, like, wildly stressed about everything.
What's your name? Because, like, that's always one of the questions. Like, please state your name.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I would just be jumping up and down on there. Like,
how old are you? I honestly don't remember. I don't know.
I really don't.
I have to think about it.
I asked Shelton.
forget how old Jarek is all the time. And honestly, we had a whole...
I look at Sheldon, I'm like, hey, am I turning 32 or 33 this year?
33, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because you're a year older than me. Jarek and I had a whole conversation about, like, starting a family. Where in his hasty little mind, he's like, let's not wait. Which I was like, okay. I
mean, biologically, sure.
Yes.
There's definitely some good reasons there.
But I was like, what do you mean, let's not wait? Because we've already talked about, I have to have a doctor's appointment before we start this. And then, like, partway through this conversation...
I think he was just excited to practice.
Ended up getting very emotional. He was like, wait, am I 35 yet? And I was like, no, honey, you're 34. And he was like, oh, well, then, yeah, we can wait until next year. I was like, okay, was this all based on the whole idea that you were already 35 and felt this? Anyways. Anyway, I have to remember my birthday because 1990 is easy. So whatever the last, my age, the last, what am I thinking of?
The last 2 digits of the current
Thank
year
you.
plus 10.
Digits. I could not think of. I was going to say the last digit of my age matches the last digit of the year. So 2022, I'm turning 32.
It's the last 2 digits plus 10 was your age.
Well, yeah, that makes sense, but okay. Okay. Back to the episode. So, all right, Joe and Victor are standing in this crime scene. And Joe is explaining why his DNA is going to be on the knife.
Over-explaining
a little bit. So at some point, Joe sent Victor upstairs to call 911. And by the time he came back down, Dylan had appeared. And allegedly, like when Joe and Victor found Robert, Victor screamed and his screams woke up Dylan. Which is odd that would wake up Dylan and the screaming of Robert didn't wake him up.
Well, so also Joe described it as a guttural moaning, which to me sounds like I'm in pain.
But then the first thing he says is, I heard a scream.
Yeah.
Also, if you remember, he called Kathy and said your husband was stabbed in the back.
Yeah, I've been waiting to get to that.
Yeah.
I figured we were going to get to that at some point.
We don't worry.
Because I was like, ooh, I wonder if there's like a double meaning behind that. Because
I mean,
there kind of is.
Yes.
Like, he got stabbed in the back by his friends who stabbed him in the front.
Yes. I feel like that is what he meant, but...
Well, also, Dylan's reaction of, like, just kind of standing there and then, like, creepily just going back into his room and closing the door.
Disappearing into the hedges.
Like, at first I was like, that's odd, but, like, everyone reacts to things differently. Maybe he was just in shock, but the fact that he took a sleeping pill makes that reaction so much...
Yeah.
It just makes so much more sense to me.
That does. I didn't even think of that.
Like, if he took a sleeping pill and he was out... and then woke up.
For all we know, he could have thought the whole thing was like a fever dream until police got there.
Yeah. And I can just, like, I know that when I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm super groggy. I'm just like, what is going on?
Yeah. Am I still dreaming?
Yeah. Am I dreaming or am I awake?
Yeah. And
then, like, also just being so groggy and out of it, like, I'm just going to go back to bed because I can't. I'm too tired.
Yeah. So all 3 men did suggest that the killer had come through the back door and had climbed over the security fence that they had in the back. Which I just want to say, again, for a $1.2 million home that has a security fence and an alarm system, it did jack shit for your imaginary home invader.
I mean, it sounds like a very skilled hitman because it obviously wasn't your average burglar because... Yeah. Nothing else in the house, I think, was touched. Yep. There's none of the valuables of Robert's were missing or touched. Stop being a creep.
Take a drink.
For the record, she just kind of froze and, like, her back stiffened, and she just gave me this weird look and just stared at me unblinkingly while she reached for her glass. Just that's so everyone knows.
That's my way of saying you're guessing ahead.
I'm hot. I'm on fire.
Okay, so they said the killer came in from the back door. there's literally no evidence that anyone climbed their fence. Like, there were, like, still cobwebs and, like, all the vegetation around it had been undisturbed. So, not a great theory. Police did bring in cadaver dogs, and they alerted on trace amounts of blood in the dryer lint trap and in a drain on the back patio. But nowhere else, which is weird. An autopsy was performed the following day on August 3rd. In addition to 3 stab wounds, the medical examiner also found a broken blood vessel in Robert's eye, which indicated that he had been smothered. She determined that the murder weapon was a 4.5-inch blade, which was not the knife that they found on the scene. And each wound was oriented the same way, and each wound was between 4 and 5 inches deep. They also found several needle marks on Robert's neck, chest, right foot, and left hand, and they all had been inflicted before he died. So she's like, okay, run a drug screen. Came back clean. But she didn't test for any paralytic drugs. So I don't know why she didn't do that.
They're probably not on your average tox screen. I feel like there's like a basic, we check for this handful of stuff. Yeah. And then anything extra you have to go scan for specifically. Well, then also some things get metabolized and broken down faster than others so that you can't.
True. Well, they also didn't save any of his blood, so they can't check it again. He had 0 defensive wounds, so literally just sat still.
This is kind of why I asked earlier about if they did a tox screen or not, because not only, okay, now that I know that there's no defensive wounds, the fact that it seemed that he was potentially incapacitated elsewhere and placed and staged on the bed, and then either already dead or very incapacitated before he was stabbed. Because if he was like A, already dead, or B, just like asleep or anything, just incapacitated, and then stabbed, he probably is going to have less blood flow.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that either.
Because if you're awake, and even if you don't fight back, and you see somebody coming at you with a knife, that's going to get your heart rate up.
Yeah.
So your heart's going to be pumping a lot more blood. Yeah. And that's why whenever you do have an injury with a lot of blood flow or everything, that's why they're like, try and stay calm. Like, walk, don't run. Don't get your heart rate up because, that'll make you bleed out faster.
I'm learning so much about first aid.
So that's why, when you were talking about how little blood there was and how it was like he just laid down and got stabbed, I'm like, he was already like knocked out or dead.
Yeah. I think she did determine cause of death was one of the stab wounds, like, to his heart. So, but they also did a rape kit, and they found semen in multiple orifices, and it was all Robert's. So, just continue making this confusing. I'll go ahead and... this is probably a good place for Dante to stop listening. Or Dante-aged listeners. For a minute. So, meanwhile, investigators spent 3 weeks going through the house and taking apart, like, literal pieces of the house. They took apart pieces of flooring, walls, part of the staircase. They took apart the washing machine and the sink, and they did not find any significant DNA. But they did discover in Dylan's room that he had a whole bunch of BDSM toys. Apparently, his relationship with Joe was a dom-sub relationship.
In my head, I called it.
You did call it.
I totally called it. There was a couple of things, like when you first started talking about the relationship dynamics, I'm like, I think that Dylan's like his pet, his toy, his plaything.
Yeah.
And then later when he tried to speak up and gave him the look, I'm like, It's a very dominant, submissive, and I just read a book that got into the lifestyle, and I learned a lot from it.
Oh.
Very interesting.
That's
I'll have to tell you all about it later.
Maybe you heard of the device, one of the devices they found called a milking machine.
I've heard of that, yes, I think.
For men, it essentially forces an ejaculation.
It's like a breast pump.
Yeah, but for other
anatomy.
Yeah. So we're just gonna leave that little fact there that's what they found, and also in the rape kit they found Robert's own semen in all of the parts.
I just want to clarify where I heard of. So I don't know if I've heard of a milking machine. But I know that there is a kink of like milking. Did you ever watch that show Dave? It's about like the white guy rapper. No. He might actually be Jewish. I can't remember. He definitely has a Jufro. It's adorable. But Shelton watched it for a little while, and I caught a couple of episodes, and there was an episode that like that was his kink being milked.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, this is not the show for me.
Yeah,
I think that was the last episode. Like, I think the next time Shelton was watching it, I was just like, no, I don't care for this show.
Yeah, I feel like that term is or that specific device is something that you kind of stumble upon. You either know what it is because you know what it is, or you like accidentally find out via research for a podcast or possibly an episode of Law and Order SVU. I don't know.
Yeah, no, like this is something you're either looking for or you trip over. Like, where the heck did that come from? This was a show about just a rapper and his life, and now you're just dropping that in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oops. Okay, and now it is safe for Dante to resume his listening. Police also discovered that there was a gap in the timeline that Joe, Victor, and Dylan presented because a neighbor had heard a scream while they were watching the news, which was from 11 to 11:30. They couldn't pinpoint exactly when it was, but it was sometime during the news. And so there was at the very least, if they heard the scream at the very end of the news program, that was at least 19 minutes before Victor called 911. So, I mean,
19 minutes is a long time.
And especially that being like at least 19, like
the minimum.
Possibly 30 minutes between when he screamed and when police were called. I mean, I feel like you can do a lot in 30 minutes, especially if you got 3 people working on it. Just saying. Police also discovered, again, in Dylan's room, I don't know why he has this. Well, okay, maybe I could think of a reason. A cutlery set in a cabinet, and there was a 4.5-inch knife that was missing from it, and they never found it. They looked in like all the dumpsters within like a certain radius. It just never found it.
Sounds like Dylan just lived in the playroom.
Yeah, I don't. Why does Dylan have a cutlery set in his cabinet?
I think, like actual, like blood play is a kink.
Okay, yeah. That's why I said I could probably think of a reason, but I don't want to. So as you mentioned, the theory about there being an intruder, like a random intruder, didn't make any sense because
did not hold water.
Yes, because nothing was stolen, and essentially for things to play out the way they did, the killer would have had to have intentionally been going for the room that Robert was in, because he'd have to go up to the 2nd floor, not the 3rd floor, bypass all of this stuff. Like, there's a couple reports that just like list all the nice stuff a burglar would have to walk past.
An entire, I'm sure, nice living room downstairs.
Yeah.
There could be like a nice dining room. There might be some silverware or something. Be worth something.
Dylan's got that cutlery set in his bedroom. They could have taken.
And we know there's at least 2 bedrooms on the 2nd floor. There might be an office or something else. There's.
Yeah.
You're in a $1.2 million townhome.
Which now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I wonder if a townhouse that costs that much in Washington, D.C. is actually, like, not that great. Just because I assume every home there costs.
Well, also, when was this?
2006.
2006. Think about how much that would cost now.
Yeah, I should look that up.
It's probably like $3 million.
But you know how I am with
money and conversions. I know.
I'm really not. I'll send it to you. I'll send you the address and you can look that up later.
We should look it up on Zillow. Check the Zestimate.
Ooh. All right, I'm going to do that afterwards. Okay. So, the other thing is that Dylan's room was, like, at the top of the stairs. It's like you get to the top of the stairs and Dylan's room is right there. The guest room is all the way at the end of the hallway. So, essentially, someone broke into this house or came into the house with the intention of killing Robert and taking a knife and then not using it. It didn't make any sense. And the only people who knew, that we know of, who knew that Robert was going to be staying there was Joe, Victor, Dylan, Robert, and Katy. Maybe Sarah, I don't know. Never heard from her again.
Seems unlikely. It sounds like she just rents the basement apartment.
Yeah, and probably never returned after that night. So, also at this point, after they had, like, been questioned and got their stories out there, the three men all immediately lawyered up and, like, stopped cooperating. Initially, they played the part of grieving friends. They went to visit Katy the day after the murder, and Joe even served as a pallbearer at Robert's funeral. 2 weeks after the murder, police officially stated that they believed the crime scene had been altered, but then, like, that was kind of it. And then a year later, the crime is still unsolved, and Katy makes a statement with her attorney, who, fun fact, was Attorney General under Obama. Not now, like, not while this is happening. That would be really cool, though, if she got the Attorney General to, like, represent her. So they make a statement essentially naming Joe, Victor, and Dylan, and urging them to come forward and tell police, like, they basically are like,
you have to know more than what
we
you're
know
saying.
you know more than what you're saying. And, like, they try to, like, kind of guilt trip them. In November of 2008, they are officially charged with obstruction of justice. And then in December of the same year, there's additional charges of conspiracy that's brought against them. By this time, Dylan had moved out of the house, but was living in one of Joe's homes that he owned in Florida. So, like, not quite out of the picture, just, like, vacation boyfriend.
Put him in the closet.
Yeah. No.
He put his toy in the closet.
Yeah. The Florida closet, though. Mm-hmm. Not the repressed closet. I don't know.
All right, fine. You put him back in the toy box.
Yeah, there you go. I was like, I'm pretty sure Dylan was still very much not in the closet.
Mixed metaphors.
Yeah, good grief. On November 25th of 2008, Katy filed a $20 million civil suit against the men, alleging that they had done nothing to help Robert after he had been stabbed. And it wasn't until 2010 that they were tried for the obstruction and conspiracy charges. And the judge determined that even though there was tons and tons of circumstantial evidence to prove that they had tampered with the crime scene, she had reasonable doubt. And she said that she did believe that they knew who the killer was. Mm-hmm. She's like, they probably know who the killer was. This all looks really sketchy, but it's all circumstantial, and there's not enough to give me, what is it? No reasonable doubt, whatever. So she acquitted them of all their charges.
Yeah. I feel like that one would be a hard one to get. Yeah, the obstruction of justice. I feel like that one would be hard to convict. But also, I feel like it would be a stepping stone for, like, or like the first domino of solving the case as a whole. Like, if they were convicted of this, then they might be willing to talk.
Yeah, and
to get out of these charges.
I think that the way they tried to play that case was they were trying to get Dylan to turn on Joe and Victor, because they're like, if we can get one of them to flip, And, like, I'm sure they offered them deals and were like, hey, Dylan, if you tell us what really happened, like, we'll do what we can to, you know, like, get this, I don't know. And the thing I don't understand is, like, where did the murder happen? Because if it was in that room, surely there'd be more blood evidence, because blood spatter had been invented by that point. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to put that on our drinking game list. But then if it was committed somewhere else, like, because there was this idea that, like, maybe it was something with the patio, because that's where they found blood in the drain. So, like, well, maybe someone tried to, like, rinse off on the patio and then threw the clothes in the dryer. But, like, they, like, took apart drains and, like, all this stuff and didn't find anything significant. And I'm like, but how? And where did that one knife go? Like, it doesn't make any sense. In 2011, Kathy settled, I think, out of court for an undisclosed amount. And this is what she said about it. Quote, I'm moving on. I want to spend the next 40 years of my life focusing on good. They can rot from the inside out from all the secrets they chose to keep. That's their choice. I choose to move on. Which I hope she has.
Good for her. Did they adopt a little girl, or were they just, like, in the process before all this happened?
I think they were just talking about doing it.
So he didn't leave behind a daughter.
Correct. I don't think they had any children. But his murder is still unsolved, and these men are just living their lives, just free and probably still rich. And yeah, that's the story of Robert Wone, and it makes me really mad. Mm-hmm. There's so much weird shit about it.
Yep. Like, so, I mean, I think that there's definitely a team effort in the cleanup.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if there was a team effort in the actual murder. My theory is it's probably Joe was the main or the only murderer. But his partner's not going to turn on him. Mm-hmm. And his sub is not going to turn on him.
Right.
Because he holds the potentially literal leash.
Yeah. I feel like Victor was, like, the only normal acting one of the group who was, like, properly reacting to finding someone stabbed to death. But yeah, like, I feel like I cannot imagine a scenario where it just happened, like, because they also mentioned, like Robert was 100%, like, straight, happily married. Like, him and Joe didn't have any kind of previous relationship. Right. And so it's not, you know, it's not like maybe Dylan came upon them and got jealous and flew into a rage, or...
Thought never entered my mind.
Yeah, like, I just can't, like, I cannot for the life of me think of a motive. And then there's weird evidence that suggests that he was, like, sexually assaulted in a really weird way before he was, like, I cannot imagine how frustrating that must be, like, for his family to have all of this evidence that points to something weird happening.
Yep.
And to have zero answers, and to know that the men probably know at least more than what they're saying.
Oh, they definitely should. Like, there's no part of that makes sense. Like, this is not a guy who has enemies.
Yeah, and his wife said that. She's like, he has the opposite of enemies.
Yeah,
he goes through life making friends.
He's just a nice person. He wants to do good where he can. Like, yeah. It makes me wonder if maybe, you know, he did discover that maybe Joe was not being a nice person anymore. Because they were nice guy buddies back in college, right?
Yeah.
So maybe he discovered something about Joe and was like, hey, you're not doing the nice thing anymore.
Yeah.
You need to do this. And Joe was like, I'll shut you up before whatever. I don't know.
Well, and, like, they didn't find, like, oh, and Dylan keeps a random, like, supply of paralyzing drugs and syringes in his cutlery cabinet. Like, ugh. And also everything that happened that they, like, they say Joe got in at a certain time and they stood in the kitchen and talked. That's all coming from people who were completely unreliable at this point. So we have really no idea what happened once Robert got there. Mm-hmm. And I'm just so frustrated with it, which is, of course, why I picked it. Yeah. But
I'm going to be thinking about this a lot.
So, anyways, everyone ponder. And they, I didn't write this down, but they did, I think they founded a bunch of, like, scholarships and foundations, like, in Robert's name.
Of course they
afterwards. Did. I know, right? We all hope that our kids turn out like him. Just a good person.
But an alive one.
An alive, yes. I know. Ugh. All right, I'm going to pick a better one next week. I'm going to pick, like, a cryptid or...
Yes.
Just... Yes. I don't know. Just a cryptid, maybe. I don't know. Okay. Do you want to tell everyone our socials?
You can find pictures of all of these characters on our Instagram and Facebook at The Tales We Tell Podcast. If you want to see the pictures but don't do the social media thing, you can go to our website, thetaleswetellpodcast.com. And if you'd like to support us, get yourself some sweet, sweet swag, you can check out our Redbubble store at redbubble.com, search The Tales We Tell. Or you can become a patron at patreon.com. You'll get some free stickers, some love notes, and some bonus content here and there.
Yay!
Thanks for listening, guys.
We'll see you next week.
Bye!